Hello and welcome once again to another episode where we tell stories. This is M&D1 Media with your host Diana, and behind the cameras, Molo Wilson. We're here to bring you another interesting story. We're just going to have a chit chat. We're going to interview, just chit chat, and listen to somebody that I've wanted to. Well, I've interviewed before, but I've always loved talking to her. She always has something to tell me. Always has something to teach me. The one and the only, I call her Africa's life coach. That's what she's known as. But I love to refer to her as my friend Jean Adero. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
It is a Saturday, and we're out here doing the thing we know how to do best.
I love it.
And you love it. I'm so glad you said yes, because, we talk all the time.
Yeah.
And we always have something. You're always teaching me something. We're always teaching each other something. There's always something new to learn, but
That's
to
true.
actually sit down and actually just talk, it's a great day to be here and to do this. So, how have you been?
I'm great.
Yeah. 2025 has started off with a
Bang.
yeah. Yeah.
With a bang.
With a bang.
It's moving really, really fast.
Isn't
and this
it?
morning, as I pulled out of my garage, I decided that I was going to slow it down.
Oh, okay. How do we slow down?
You know why? Last March,
Yeah.
I took an assignment. I think it was on the 15th.
Yeah.
And I never caught the year back.
Wow.
That's what I was thinking about this morning.
Wow.
So I have to slow it down so that I can catch the year.
Can we really slow it down? Because I feel like we just said Happy New Year.
Yeah.
We just said Happy New Year 3 days ago, and now we are heading towards April in a crazy speed.
You can definitely slow down a year.
Yeah.
You just decide what you're going to focus on.
Yeah.
And then let everything else go because it can be done next year.
I like always, because you're always talking about resetting. So you can
Yeah.
always just stop, reset, and go back. Your year doesn't have to start at January 1st. It can start anytime you decide for it to start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's so important for me to do that is because I believe I lost a relationship that would have been a good business relationship because I never slowed down.
Ah.
Yeah.
And you only realized it this year or back then? Like, when
No.
did you realize that something was off and something was missing?
So I had several projects, and I remember that March she asked me to do something and I should have said no.
Oh.
And then I did it, but it took a whole weekend and it stole my time. I should have been doing something else that weekend.
Yeah.
And I didn't remove some projects and I never caught up. So now I'm looking at it and I was like, what was the value of saying yes to something that was good, but I didn't follow through on some of the things that should have come out from that relationship.
So most of us always know Oprah. We know Oprah from her TV show and all that stuff. But the one thing that you've taught me, or I've learned from you, is I subscribe to her things now, whether it's emails, whether
Yes.
it's whatever. And there was a lady that she interviewed, I think last week or in the past week or something like that. And the lady was talking about the sacredness of no. And you just mentioned that. And
Yeah.
the way she explained it, it never hit me that your no has to be sacred. Like, it can't just be something that you throw around to everything. Like, when you mean it, it has to mean something. And it actually is the thing to help us cut down all the busyness of things that we're doing.
Yeah, that is true because, I mean, think about it in this case. I could still go back to that relationship and say, this is what happened.
Yeah.
But why did I get myself in a situation where I have to do all this explaining? And then I got so busy with other projects that are valuable.
Yeah.
But when I look at it and reflect on what I gained, I think that relationship would have brought me further along.
So did it bear fruit, that relationship, that you drop everything for?
No, I dropped the
instead?
ball, so I haven't continued the relationship.
So neither did you accomplish that, neither did you accomplish everything else that
Yeah.
was supposed to come as a result
Yeah.
of that. And
Yeah.
so one of the things we always talk about with you is about lessons. In
Yeah.
life, everything is a lesson, good or bad, positive or negative. It is a lesson. You choose how you're going to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned to me is before the lesson, there are key moments, and then there's struggles, and then there is the lesson that comes.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way of looking at things because I don't think we actually look at things like that, especially when you're going through them. It's
Yeah.
almost hindsight,
Yeah.
2020. And I'd like us to go, well, now when you say 2020, that year was a very fishy year for most of us. So I don't know if they should change that. But when let's go back.
Yeah.
No, because you and I can talk of various things in various angles.
Yeah.
All the way. But let's go back, and I'm not going to take you all the way back to when you were born and growing up in Kenya, but let's just talk about when you first arrived in the U.S. Right.
Right.
There are key moments that happened that actually affect who you are in life today.
Yeah.
And it's only because you have sat down to look back and see what that. So can you take us back and let's see, when you first landed, what is a key moment that you experienced in life that started this whole ball rolling? Let me take a pause. There's a lot of things and hats you wear today.
Yeah.
What are those hats? Before, it'll make sense when you start
When I
talking
start-
about them, what those are. So
In
what are
terms
the
of the work that I do?
Yes, in everything.
Yeah.
Philanthropist.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like to call myself a philanthropist because I have funded Read Across Africa.
Okay.
I have really funded
You have
Read
funded.
Read
Yeah.
Across Africa,
Yeah.
which is a charity that I started.
Yeah.
I converted my parents' home into a library. And I could not have done it without the help of my sisters.
Yeah.
But, when you're the brains behind it, you're the visionary, there are certain things that you want for it that you just have to do yourself
Yeah.
and get your team. And my sisters are there to support it. So
Yeah.
that's the first one.
Yeah.
And then, of course, my background is in organizational change, learning and development.
Yeah.
So I was in corporate for several years doing that. I started off with public relations and advertising, but I switched to learning.
Our thing. That is our thing.
That is our thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I switched to learning and
Yeah.
development after a short stint in marketing and then organizational change, and realized in corporate that people want change. Organizations want change, but the leaders don't want to change.
Organizations want change,
Yeah.
but
The leaders
don't
do not
want.
want to change.
Is it still
Because
true since then, since you've done
I believe so, but
Okay.
when you're talking about it from an organizational perspective.
Yeah.
But on a personal level,
Yeah.
people want change,
Yeah.
and many people want to change. And that's why it was easy for me to walk away from organizational change and go into coaching, where I'm working one-on-one with a person who shows up on my calendar and says, I want to change.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it's a much easier thing to do.
And then let's not forget about I Am Africa.
Oh, yes. And, out of coaching,
Yeah.
and through the pandemic, the ladies in the first coaching cohort
Yeah.
asked for a space where they could get to meet, because
Yeah.
we used to meet on Monday night until midnight because
Yeah.
we didn't have anywhere to go during
Don't forget the
pandemic.
Wednesday class we came into.
I know, but I'm talking about the original cohort,
ones.
right?
Yeah.
And so they wanted to, once, we're getting out of it, I remember there's one lady, Purity Ateku, she came to me and she said, Jean, we're going somewhere with you.
Somewhere. Yeah.
And it's not Texas, because at the time she lived in Texas and she wanted to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And then it was funny because she said, Joe Biden said, we have to open the country by July 4th.
That's
and
what
what are you going to do about it?
Was it 2021?
2021. Yes. And that was when I came up with a girls' weekend getaway,
yeah.
which is now the I Am Africa experience.
One of the wildly popular things.
Yes.
I don't like when you hear that time is around that time to come. That's where, you met in the coaching, but that's where we solidified
Yeah.
how I've known you all these years long. So you
Yes.
do put on a lot of hats. So
I do.
we mentioned that because they're going to pop up
Yes.
along our conversation.
Yeah.
Just in terms of what point in life you could see this is where this was birthed
Right.
and that was birthed.
Right.
Okay, so we go back to the beginning. A key moment. You told me you were working one place and you were bored.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of interesting. I have to kind of go back.
Okay.
Before I got bored.
Yes.
Remember, I came in as a college student.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's better to start there so I can frame it.
Okay.
I don't want everyone to think I was
You
lazy.
just worked. You were just born and you are
People
you're
to
born.
think I was lazy.
But and what is interesting is you're far from that. Like we don't that gene we don't know, but now it's very hard to
Right.
imagine you as
As
Gene
the
the board.
bored
Yes. Okay.
person,
Let's
right?
go back then. Yes.
So when I came in,
Yeah.
I had just turned 20.
What year was it?
That
Oh,
was
you're not aging.
1999. I
Okay.
opened Atlanta, Georgia.
19.
So for all of you who live in Atlanta, I opened it for you.
Yes.
No, there were many Kenyans who had been here,
At the
but we
time.
were such a small, close knit community at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Fresh faced.
Yeah.
Coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically what I had done when I was in high school, I decided a long time ago that I would move to the US.
Okay.
I had no money, my parents had no money, but I had decided that I was going to do that because I used to read the Essence magazine. My mom worked at the United Nations and I'd go to the library and I'd read the Essence magazine and I liked what the women in there were doing. I didn't know what they were doing. They just looked like they were doing something important. So that was in my mind, if you think about it from that perspective. So I come into the US and I pretty much know that I'm going to be one of those women who do something important. I just don't know what it is.
That's for a 20-year-old. That's very clear because some of us are out here till late is when we figure out, but that's very clear at that young age.
Yeah, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have a person to show me how to do it.
Yeah.
And I come in, and it was interesting because my parents had disagreed on the idea of me coming to the U.S.
Oh.
Right? My mom wanted freedom. She wanted me to have freedom.
Yeah.
Go and build your life. As most mothers who came up, like they were born in the 50s,
Yeah.
their kids were born in the 70s.
Yeah.
They really desired that because we're in a time when women were just starting to do a lot of things that men were doing. So my mom was an admin assistant. She was like, go and do something big.
With your life.
As I remember, she used to tell me, I can afford India. Do you want me to send you to India? Because at the time, a lot of kids were going to school in India.
And she used to read those essays. I'm assuming she's the
She
one who would bring
did.
them in.
As a matter of fact, I remember her telling me in the early years that I remember this clearly. She said, when I get the Essence magazine, I always turn to Susan Taylor first. She was the editor-in-chief.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about Susan Taylor's story is Susan Taylor did not have a degree. She did not have, I think she was a single mother on welfare. At least she started from there. And she went out and she was the editor-in-chief of Essence and built it. She was the foundation of what Essence is today. So when you see Caroline Wanga, who is a Kenyan, you're like, thank you, Susan Taylor.
Yes. And if you
right?
don't know Susan Taylor, look her up. She's as fabulous
And
as
I have
they
all
come.
her books, and I've
Do
sent
you
them to
really?
my friends.
Really?
I owe you a book.
Yes, you do. She's even now, years later on, she's still as fabulous as I'm sure in her height she was,
Yeah, and even now she's, of
She
course, you
still
can
is,
think about it with the wisdom she has,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that is the backdrop of how I was thinking, right? In my mind, that was what America could bring. So I walk into Atlanta. I remember my mom packing my suitcase. She kept asking me, have you packed? Yes. And then she said, I have this blanket. I still have it. And she said, take this blanket and put it on the top of your suitcase. I don't know who's going to pick you up because when you arrive in America, it'll be Sunday. And you're going to the school. So if you have to sleep at the airport, I want you to have a blanket.
Wow.
Then guess what? Because I was 20, I didn't do it.
Wow.
And then when I went to my room, the blanket was in my suitcase. So I was like, okay,
So
this
she
is
put it
serious.
there.
I'm taking the blanket with me, right?
So you had the dream was there, the awe, the wonder of I'm going to America, but it didn't hit you until a moment like that.
Yeah, but it wasn't even an active dream.
Yeah.
I can't say it was an active dream. Now when I look back, I'm clear on what you keep in your mind. But at the time, I can't say I'm coming to America with Susan Taylor on my mind. I wasn't. The only thing that I was doing actively at the time is I was imagining what it would be like in the U.S. Because if you look at it this way, my mother is trying to send me to the United States with her life savings. My father is like, you're not taking my child anyway. Right?
Yeah.
And my father is basically saying, I remember him saying clearly, you're sending her to the U.S. without money for a hamburger. And as a parent, if you think about it, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
If you had asked me at the time, I'd be like, Daddy is so mean. But if you look at it from a 50-something-year-old's eyes,
Right,
it's like
right.
you want your child to
Right.
have money to buy food.
Yes.
And my mom was like, we're just taking the risk, right? And now I look at it and I'm like, okay. But at the time, I was so mad at my dad because I felt he wasn't supportive. So I'm coming to the U.S., and my dad didn't know what to do with it as a man. Because it's like, your wife has paid.
She's
Your hard-headed daughter is obviously doing what teenagers do.
yeah.
She's going to choose the one with the money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was leaving and I left.
Do you feel like your mother wanted it more for you than you wanted it for yourself?
No. I think my mother knew me well.
Ah.
Remember, so I had gone to Queensway Secretarial College,
Oh,
right?
Queensway.
My mother was a secretary. So at the time we had to do shorthand
Yeah.
and typing.
Yeah.
And one day I come to my mom and I say, "Oh my goodness, I did so well on my test." And she was like, how many words per minute did you type? No, it wasn't typing, it was shorthand. I said 60 words per minute. My mom was like, "This is not your thing." Because my mom's shorthand was at 120 words per minute plus. She was really fast.
That is fast.
And do you know how she got into the United Nations?
Yeah.
When she did her shorthand, she finished before everybody to the point where she thought she had missed a paragraph.
Oh, wow.
So she was like, you are not going to go far with it.
But she had the
knew who I
foresight
was.
or to the insight to just be like, there's something here.
Yeah. Yeah. She knew who I was.
And just the even just to stand up against your husband to be like, this is what I'm doing for her, and she's going.
That was kind of bold though. Because my mom was a little quiet.
Very.
I mean, it was bold.
If she's been watching Essence and Susan Taylor, at some point something gotta jump out from that to you.
And and I also think that if you look at it, many families in Kenya have miserable parents. They should not be married, but they stayed married. So people say there's a high rate of divorce, and I think there could have been a high rate of divorce if they were allowed to divorce at the time, right?
Yeah.
When I look at it, I don't believe my parents should have been married for 30 years because they were just not good for each other, right? And I think that is, when I talk to my friends, some of my friends would like to pretend that their parents were happy. We can see that they were not.
We can tell.
We cannot. And I have no problem saying that because now I am a 53-year-old woman who is in a marriage, and I know that things happen and you've got to figure it out together. And if you're not, it's not working. And when your child comes and says, "I want to do this," you try and do the best. Yeah. So I leave Kenya and I come, and now my mom is telling me all these things. Now looking back, she was like, let me make sure that she's not homeless from day one. And that's why she was saying that. So I get to Atlanta and I go straight to Morris Brown College, and the funniest thing happened. I was at an HBCU, and because I don't know if it's all the stuff that was going on in our family when I was trying to leave, but I missed somewhere that it was a black school.
You just saw America. Anything else other than that?
I had visualized it, because what I used to do is I used to play.
Wait, you had visualized what?
The school.
That you wanted to go to a black school?
No, I had visualized, I could see myself in America. So as my parents were going through this turmoil, I used to just switch off and imagine myself in Atlanta. And I had these schools. I was on campus, and I'd be walking around. I'd be in the classroom. I literally actively did that during that period. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just escaping. But that's how I did it, right? And so when I get here, I guess I visualize some white people.
No, because, okay, and in your own defense, right?
Yeah.
Where we grew up in Kenya, we didn't see, everybody looked like us, so there was no, and then you almost just thought America was where the white people, it's anywhere Western, right? Europe, whatever.
Right.
You never, ever, and most of us go through that, not now, the world has become smaller.
Right.
But back then when you came, even I came in 99,
but
I was in California, but that's what you thought. Like you never even knew there would be maybe I'd see a Kenyan.
I didn't know there was a black school.
Right.
I didn't. The concept of a school started by African Americans, and Morris Brown College is the only one that was started by black people. Of those 4 schools in the Atlanta University Center, Spelman is Rockefeller's wife. Spelman is her maiden name is Spelman. Morris Brown is the only school in the AUC, and I don't know if it's really among all the HBCUs, but it was for blacks by blacks. So I land in the school for blacks by blacks, and I'm looking for the white people.
And then,
so one day,
wow.
So one day, in the first day, I had a wonderful roommate, and I wish I could find her. Her name was Tori Hines.
Yeah.
and she was 20, so I was also, she was a sophomore, and she and I were room together because that's what they did. They matched you with someone who was close to your age. So I was a freshman, and I remember asking her, where are the white people? And she was like, this is a black school.
Oh my gosh.
So my introduction to America was with the most brilliant professors.
So I feel like, and okay, you went a step further. The regular us, when we came, the first shock was just being in America. Like, what is this place? First of all, because you've not seen anything like that. Then it's just the simple things: money, learning to count, and you're always told to hold your passport close so that if you don't lose it, that's the end of you.
That was it.
Right.
If you lose your passport.
And now you have the added. One of where the white people, I only see black people here, and that's on its own. It's also just a culture shock, right?
Yeah. And so here I am at HBCU, and guess what I'm hearing from, I met some Kenyans, and what I'm hearing from other Kenyans is you need to get out of that school. It's expensive and it's not a good school. And I'm like, not so much. There's one thing that I was going to do when I left Kenya is I could see the school, and I knew I had a scholarship. So guess what? I made my job every day.
Did you had a scholarship at that time?
No, I had my mother's life savings.
Your mother's life savings. But you knew.
In my head.
You knew.
I had a scholarship, right? And so every single day, I made it my job, because I couldn't work. I made it my job to apply for scholarships, whether I was qualified or not.
I'm curious, where does that tenacity, I know we are a long way from where we're going, but this is what happens when you talk. Where does that tenacity come from? Because at 20, I was just like, where's my next meal coming from? I did not.
So there are a couple of things that happened. And I think one of them is the 844 system. I think it was well intended because we're going to learn the other skills and we're going to move from this theoretical world.
Yeah.
But I think what was lost because it was not started from first grade. It was just some kids' lives were interrupted. They were already on one path.
Yeah.
And then...
you guys were what, 766 or whatever?
Right.
It was some weird... Yeah.
Right. Which is a whole story how I got there because I was supposed to be in the 844 system. All right.
So then you're put on this 844 path.
And so you're put in this 844 path. It was confusing. I remember just thinking, oh my God, I skipped it because I was the last A level. And in that world... we used to learn, I feel like we were intellectually prepared for the unexpected. And then we had to, Form 5 and 6 did something to you because you grew up. You were the seniors of the school. You were looked at in a different way and you behaved in a different way. And also for me, I had the advantage of going to Kenya High School, where it actually meant something to be a senior.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't go to Kenya High School for A-level, when I went to my new school, I still knew that it carried some importance, and I had to behave in a certain way and act like a leader, right? Yeah. So I don't think it, and then of course my mom and dad, we were expected to do stuff. Yeah. We didn't have the luxury of, I just see there's a new parenting style that works and does not work.
I tell you what.
But there's one where accountability is not being included now.
It meant something.
Now, in our world, it meant something. Yeah. What do you mean you volunteered and you didn't show up? Like, what? Who does that? Like, we could not volunteer for something and not show up because we were like, someone is going to hold you accountable.
Right. I feel like that's kind of the parenting style that I carried over when I was raised to now, where I told my kids, you'd rather not sign up for a sport if you're not going to finish it. Like, don't even bother starting.
Right.
But once you're in it, you're going to have to roll with the punches, whatever goes. So you feel like that's where you're...
Yeah, I think that's the history of it. So at Morris Brown, I'm already adult. I remember, and think about it. In our A-level, I took literature.
Yeah.
By the time I came to the United States, I had read Native Son. Native Son is a hard story to read. I mean, it's literally George Floyd's story in the 1930s. I'll never forget Bigger Thomas. That's a book every African should read so that you can understand what has happened to black people in America. I had already read So Many Hungers about India.
Wait, before you came?
In high school. That was our literature.
Seriously?
We read like 4 books. By the time I was doing A levels, we had studied Russia, we had studied Uganda, we had studied, and then we did hard things. So when I come in and sit in a class at Morris Brown College, my professors are like, okay, so what have you read? We're talking about it. And I said Native Son, and they looked at me like, what? And I remember my professor stopping to actually have that conversation with me. He's
To
like,
acknowledge that
that is a hard book to read, number one, emotionally, and then it's a hard book to study in literature.
because you really break it down in literature, every down to the nitty gritty.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, we had done books by Charles Dickens and literally studied them. So if you think about this, I'm talking about my literature perspective. Those who had done sciences had also done that kind of in-depth work. Those who had done art had done that in-depth work. That's how the system was. So the folks who came, when you say that I wasn't that dedicated to anything,
Yeah.
I really think it's a function of how the 844 system interrupted something that you had already started in first grade. 844 would have worked if they started it in preschool.
Ah.
Yeah, like if they started the first one so that the teachers had a chance to grow with it.
Yeah.
And the teachers didn't. They were interrupted as well. They couldn't teach because there were no books. Actually, it's a repeat of what's happening in Kenya right now. I run a library, I know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when I come to school, for me at that point, I'm looking at life and I'm like, I'm prepared for this. And my personality lives well in ambiguity. I don't have to know everything.
And that also, that life, as we knew it for us then, there were no, whatever you had, that was the choice. Like you did,
Right.
it wasn't like, I don't like this now, so I quit it and go to you got
Yeah.
that one thing, you stuck with it and you did it.
Which has its drawbacks.
It does,
but,
yes.
But life always
Yes.
gives you the detour.
Yes.
And you get to choose.
Yeah.
You see, because there's some things I wished I had then and I didn't, and I have gotten to choose them along the way now. Right? So when you look at it, I arrive at Morris Brown and I don't have the money. I'm worried about where I'll get the money from, but in the back of my mind, I'm going to get a scholarship.
A scholarship. It's still there.
Yeah. And so I applied and I said, okay, if I get all A's in first semester, because I don't have anything to do but study. So I get all A's in first semester, then I have a chance.
So explain this to me, and this is just in we are different time periods as time has gone
Right.
by. When you back at that time, you did have a visa, and that visa did not allow you to work.
Oh,
right?
no, it didn't allow you to work.
All it allowed you to do was go to school, and
Go to
that's
school.
it.
Yeah. But you see, on the campus, you could work, but you couldn't work as a freshman. I remember going to this, there was a guy who worked in the students' center or something like that, and
Yeah.
he was from Liberia. And I went to him and I was like, all I need is a job. And he was like, all you need is to study. I was like, my brother.
Yeah, speak to me, help me out
Help me
here.
out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the good thing about the Kenyans in Atlanta is that on the day I arrived with this friend of mine. I'll still call him my friend because he and I were on the same flight from Nairobi, and he was going to Clark Atlanta University, which was also in the AU Center. And when I was picked up, we arrived at the airport on the same flight, Mugo was picked up by Reverend Wandu. Remember the late Reverend Wandu?
Yes, yes.
And I remember Reverend Wandu saying, "Do you want us to take you?"
Wow.
It
Wow.
meant a lot.
Because think about it, your mother
Yeah.
had told, I'm giving you this blanket,
Yeah.
and I don't know who is going to pick
Yeah.
you up.
Yeah. It meant a whole lot because I was waiting for, and by the way, there were no cell phones, remember?
I don't. There was no way of communicating. We would wait for your letter to come.
So I was going to be picked up by the international student director.
Wow.
Because we had paid for transportation, so I could, we could get to the dorm and all that.
Yeah.
And it was Sunday afternoon, and he came to pick me. I remember him looking at Reverend Wandu like, "You must be crazy."
To try and take my the person I've
Because
come
he
here
was
to
responsible.
pick.
Think about it from a Kenyan perspective. Reverend
Oh,
Wandu is like, "Yes,
yeah.
I'll take you if you don't have
Which is
anywhere
what
to go."
we do.
Which is what we do.
Yes.
But Mr. McGregor is like, "What?
Who are you? I don't know you from
You're going to
Adam.
take them where?" So he arrived at the same time, and I stayed at his house overnight, and then the next day I was in the dorm. So at the dorm, you can imagine it's culture shock, and just all this. But the key moment is that I was in America, and I was making the decision that it was going to work.
You are no longer in Nairobi.
It was going to work.
Yeah.
And so I went to school. I got all A's first semester.
Yeah.
And I met a Kenyan, and I moved out with my roommate's name was Peace.
Okay.
She's a wonderful lady. I still think very highly of her because she taught me a lot of things. And I moved in with her. We became roommates. And second semester, I didn't have a plan. I was waiting for my scholarship.
Because your mom had given you what
My
she
mom
had
had
given
paid me
you.
for it was for
you
the whole
did
year,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I was waiting for my scholarship, and I applied to the last one because I kept getting rejection letters.
Yeah.
And then I think there was one which was a Malcolm X scholarship, and I was second. I was like, "What do you mean I'm second? Second doesn't get any money."
Yeah.
And then the academic scholarship I applied for Morris Brown, I found out about it at the last minute for people who had got all A's. I was like, "That's me." Like, let me tell you one thing about me. I read a document and I look for the one thing that allows me in. I never look at it and say, this excludes me because. I only look for the thing that allows me in.
Thing.
And there was something, it said something, and then it was silent on whether you were an international student. So I knew I was going to challenge it if they had said that I had to be if I had to be an American. And I had one thing, I had a 4.0, and I wrote a letter and they sent me a rejection. And I was like, oh my God, I'm screwed.
Okay, let's take a quick break here. There's a lot to process here. We haven't even got started, but you have a lot to process here. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back and pick up from what happens when you don't have money and now the school is looking at you and the scholarship is about to become a reality. We'll be right back.